So we're now on the top of Daf Chavav Amid Beis, and we just established that if the synagogue was sold by the Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir b'Maimed Anshe Ha'ir, then there are no restrictions whatsoever. The monies that are accrued by the sale can be used even to buy beer. There's nothing that inhibits us, and the principle of Mailam B'Kodesh doesn't apply. Ravina Havile Lahu Tila Debei Knishta. So he had ruins of a shul, and that was located in one of his fields. And he wanted to use the rubble, the ruins, to build a new shul. Also, Lekami de Ravashi, V'Yomale Ma'ul Mizrah. In other words, do the ruins of the shul still have kedusha to them, or can I do whatever I want with them? Can I use them to build another shul, or alternatively, can I use them just simply to sow my field? And there's no kedusha left after the shul is gone. Let the Shiva Tuvei sell you the ruins, the heap of rubble from the shul in presence of the Anshe Ir, Uzra, and then you can do it. So it seems that Rav Ashi held that even a Beis Knesses B'churbano, even when it's ruins, it's a heap of rubble, as we said, it still maintains its kedusha. Therefore, you need the Shiva, Tuvei Ir, etc. Rami Bar Abba Havika Bani Beiknishta. He was building, Rami, a synagogue. Havile Hahi Knishta Tika. He had an old synagogue. He wanted to break down the old synagogue, and to use the bricks and the beams from that old shul. And then use them to build the replacement of brand new shul. Yosef he was sitting and asking that very question. The Rabbi Chizda, the Omar of Chizda, lo listar beiknishta ad de bani beiknishta achrini. You're not allowed to build a shul. You're not allowed to break down a shul until you already have the new shul up and running to replace the old shul. Otherwise, we're afraid that if we let you build, break up the old shul, you'll never get around to building the new shul. So Rami has the following suffix. He says, Hasa mishum shiusa. Okay, if you allow them to take down the old shul, they might not get around to be building the new shul, the replacement shul. That's called shiusa, negligence. But kihai gavna, here, well, what am I doing? I'm taking the demolition for the very purpose of building another shul, and I'm using the bricks, the beams from the old shul for the new shul. There's no chashash of pshiusa. And Rami was vacillating on this question. Basically, they didn't allow it. And I'm tempted to think, I have no proof of this, that this is an application of the general principle called lo plug. We don't use the bricks and beams of an old shul, period. Could be the original gzera was made because of pshiusa, but we don't have to find that in every single scenario there's pshiusa. Omar Rava, hi beiknishta, chilufa, vizabuna, shari, ogura, umashkuna, asu. If you want to sell a shul, you're allowed to do so. Probably he means if there's Sheva Tuvei Ir, Maimed Anshe Ir, you're allowed to sell the shul, and then the sanctity of the shul transfers over to the money. And then you have laws that restrict you as to what you can do with the money. You have to buy Sefer Torah, whatever you have to buy. But agura, you want to rent out a shul or mashkuna, you want to mortgage it out for an outstanding loan, also. My time of kedusha koi. It retains its status and its kedusha. You can't take kedusha and use it for tarchei chol, for secular purposes, mundane purposes. So it means the following: Bishlema, if you're doing a chalufa or a zvune and you're selling it or you're exchanging it, so now the kedusha transfers over to the new object that you purchased. But in the case of rental, where's the transfer of kedusha? You're just getting paid as a rental fees. Now Rava goes even a step further and he says, Livnei nami chalufinu vizubinu shari ozofinu asur. The bricks and the different parts of the structure, the beams and so forth of the synagogue, you're allowed to sell them or you're allowed to exchange them, but you're not allowed to lend them or rent them. So the chiddush now of Rava is that not only is the Beis Knesset limited, and the conditions have to be met in order to permit selling the Beis HaKnesses, and certainly renting out the Beis HaKnesses is not permissible, but those halachas apply even to the beams and the bricks of the Beis HaKnesses, even though we're not talking about the Beis HaKnesses as a whole. Aval b'chadeto leslan ba. Now, what does this mean? Aval b'chadeto. Now we're talking about new bricks, not bricks from an old shul. Leslan ba. Oh, I understand. Yeah, you have to know the laws of muktzah for this. What he means that we're talking about bricks that were designated for the purpose of building a synagogue. They haven't yet been used. Now, if you haven't used them yet, what's the havamina that they would have kedusha? So this is sugya Masechet Nedarim called hazmana, and this is a great debate about whether hazmana milsa or hazmana lav milsa. Like, for example, shrouds. What are they called? No, the word escaped my mind here for a second.
Tachrichim.
Tachrichim. Thank you. Tachrichim. If you designate, let's say, a garment as tachrichim, it hasn't been used yet, and tachrichim are also ba'na, that's a machlokes whether hazmana milsa or lav milsa. So the Gemara says, afilu man di'omer hazmana milsa he. And you would therefore say that if you have new bricks that were designated for a synagogue, maybe it's already has the status of a hegdesh. You can't use it for redirected for personal mundane usage. Ani mili kagona orig beged lemes. Aval hacha bitavui li orig dami. When you weave tachrichim for the purpose of burying the dead, then if you hold hazmana milsa, it becomes awesome. You're not allowed to use and redirect that shroud, that woolen garment, and use it for your own purposes. Aval hacha, but here, when we have bricks that were set aside for the building of the synagogue, the walls of the synagogue, that's comparable to weaving tavui liarik. So he's not creating tachrichim, he already has tachrichim. And here also, well, let's just get the analogy. He designates the bricks and he's not manufacturing new bricks. The bricks are there. He's just designating them, assigning them for the Beis HaKnesses. When do we say Azmana Milsa? That's only if he creates something. Like, let's say, for example, you build a Beis HaKiseh or a Beis HaMercha. So Hazmana Milsa means it already has a din of Beis HaKiseh even before you use it the first time. But that's because you manufactured, you created something for a certain specific purpose. And Azmana Milsa, he means it already takes on the din and the status with all the Yisurim thereof of that final product once you designate for the creation of that final product. But that which exists in nature, like, for example, here we're talking about, the stones and the bricks that you want to use for building the Beis HaKnesses, that's like Tavui Liarik. It's already been woven. Now we get to a real suffix. Now, on this sugya that we're about to learn, we have a major breakthrough of the Ramban. So I'm a little bit nervous about this, Rabbi, because I remember Rav Soloveitchik when he said Shiurim on this Ramban, which actually I just thought of it. I have that sefer right here in front of me. I don't know if you've ever heard, does the name Rabbi Menachem Binak mean anything to you? So this is a book that was written by Rabbi Menachem Binak. It's called Shiurei Arav on Hilchos, Tefillah, and Kriyat Shema. They're based on Rav Soloveitchik's oral lectures. And he has a whole shir on this Ramban, very complicated. I'm going to just try, if I can, just from what I remember back in the old day, give us a flavor of this Ramban. It would require hours and hours of study. Matana pligi ba Rav Acha v'Ravina chadasa v'chad sharit. Are you allowed to give the synagogue as a gift? And the recipient of that gift could now use the synagogue for whatever purpose he wants. It no longer has the status of a synagogue. Kedushas Beis HaKnesses. Mandi Osar, I understand very well. That's simple. Bahai b'mai or Bahai tifka kedushasa. Until now, we've been discussing transferring the kedusha of a Beis HaKnesses onto damim. And then we have to earmark those damim for some higher level of kedusha, ma'alim b'kodesh. But you're not transferring the kedushas Beis HaKnesses onto anything. You're just giving a gift, an outright gift. So for sure, it retains its kedusha. Uman deshari. And what about the Mandi Omar, who allows you to give a gift? And the recipient now can use the shul in any way he so chooses. He says, Ilav, how does he transfer the kedusha over to what? I mean, Ilav da'avi le'anomine lo avi yoev. In other words, why are the people in town giving away a gift of a synagogue to a certain individual? Apparently, this individual is Mahana, right? The members of the city are getting some benefit. Maybe this guy is going to open up a free kitchen or a soup kitchen, or maybe he's already donated lots of money to build up the city. Who knows? But Chad Shari means that according to one opinion, the hana that the recipient is getting is kind of like a chalipin to transfer the kedusha of the shul ve'hadar havile matana kizvini, and therefore matana is like a sale. So the Ramban doesn't understand what's going on. How could it be that according to one man Diomar, matana kizvini, in the case of zvini, you have a physical object and you transfer the kedusha of a sacred object onto that object. Like, for example, if you do a chalipin, or in the case of a regular outright sale, in the case of damin. So by transferring the kedusha onto damin, you basically remove the kedusha status of the original object. So the shul, in this case, loses its status of kedusha because it was transferred onto something else, and that's called pidyon. And the Ramban says, with all due respect, again, there are a lot of indications that our sugya that we've been learning is about pidyon. We'll go through some of the indications, but if the Gemara thinks it should apply to matana, in the case of matana, there's no pidyon. You're not transferring the kedusha onto anything. You're just giving him the whole shul on a silver platter. So we saw in that Mishnah that the monies that accrue from the sale of a shul have to be directed towards a higher level of kedusha. The Gemara says that you're not allowed to rent out a shul. That would also indicate that it has kedusha. But at the end of the day, says the Ramban, how could you possibly justify a gift? Where is the transfer of kedusha onto what? Onto what non-sacred object? Says the Ramban, a shul doesn't have kedusha. The breakthrough of the Ramban. Again, what we've been assuming throughout this entire sugya, that the shul needs pidyon because of its kedusha, and we are transferring the kedusha, taking it out of the shul and putting it elsewhere. It's all wrong. So what is the status of a shul? If it's not hegdish and there's no pidyon going in. So Ramban introduces a very famous concept, which we're going to learn about right now, called tashmishe mitzvah, something that's dedicated, an object dedicated for a mitzvah, like sukkah, lulav, shofar, and tzitzis. And we want to avoid bizui mitzvah. And in order to treat a hefta shel mitzvah properly, like the case of a synagogue with proper kavod, then we have all these restrictions that are written out in this entire sugya about selling a Beis HaKnesses. You're going to sell a Beis HaKnesses and use the monies to gamble in Las Vegas, the Beis Boss. What could be a greater chilul of hegdish? But it's not hegdish. And it's not chilul hegdish. So what is it? It's called naseis mitzvos. At some point, we say that the object is no longer designated for a mitzvah, and therefore you can do whatever you want. You designated schach for a sukkah, and it's definitely tashmishe mitzvah. Or the daled minim for the mitzvah of lulav, shofar for the mitzvah of shofar, etc., etc. It's a hefta shel mitzvah, but at some point in time, your use of the mitzvah terminates. You fulfilled your mitzvah, I sat in the sukkah for 7-8 days, and now I'm out of the sukkah. I took the lulav, and now I finished with the daled minim. There's no longer a status of tashmish and mitzvah. So the Ramban wants to take this concept of tashmish and mitzvah and apply it to a synagogue. A synagogue is not hegdesh, but it is designated for the mitzvah of tefillah. Says the Ramban that when the Zion Tuvei Ha'ir sell a shul, if they have the authorization of the members of that town, then we have designated this area for the mitzvah of tefillah, but at some point, we want to say that the shul is no longer needed. We don't have to, it's not functioning as a makom tefillah. So why don't we exchange this edifice for money? Because it's no longer busy mitzvah. I'm not embarrassing the mitzvah if I've already completed the mitzvah. So it seems that the Ramban holds that the Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir are making the decision that the mitzvah, as far as this synagogue is concerned, the mitzvah of tefillah has reached its fruition. And therefore the status of tashmish mitzvah is no longer applicable. So the Ramban says, I understand very well that the Anshe Tuvei Ha'ir, the Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir, when they sell a synagogue, they are getting a benefit from the sale that's necessary. They need those funds. And we're going to require that those funds are earmarked for some greater kedusha. All this within the framework of tashmish and mitzvah. But what about the case of matana? So Ramban comes up with a brand new svara. He says that the Anshe, the Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir representing the city, would only have given away the synagogue as a gift if that recipient was a great magnanimous donor. He built mikvos, he built, bridges. I don't know what he built in the city, but we're getting benefit from it. And the Tuvei Ha'ir have the right to determine that the benefit that we get from this person makes it worth it for us to give him the shul. It's a nice piece of property, it's real estate. And now it's Paka Mitzvot. Mamish, a wild Ramban. The Ran disagrees, and other Rishonim. I mean, the whole sugya seems to be built on the premise that we're talking about Hegdish, and the shul has a din of Hegdish. Omar Rava, Mereish Hava Mina, originally I thought, Hai Kursaya. So this is the teva on which we put the Sefer Torah for reading the Torah, Tashmishi to Tashmishi, right? It's an accessory to an accessory. Why? Because the Sefer Torah itself is covered by a mantle. So when you put the Sefer Torah down on the teva, or we have the Eitz Chaim and so forth, then you have the mantle, and that's a tashmish to kedusha. And now you have the teva, the bima on which you put the Sefer Torah. So that's another tashmish. Kavon, however, and Vishari, and therefore I could do whatever I want with this teva. Like, for example, if you daven in the Amic Learning Center Friday night, especially if the Spanish young fellows are there, you'll see how they make drums, they bang on the teva. I was never happy with that. I never felt comfortable with it. But they make music on the table. The shari, it's tashmish to tashmish. But then Rava said, no. Changed his mind. Kevan de chazina de mosve iluye sefer Torah, that there are many occasions on which they put the sefer Torah directly on the teva, and it's no longer tashmish to tashmish, it's now tashmish to kedusha. Is amina tashmish to kedusha v'yasur. That's statement number one. Number two, v'yamar Rava meireish havamina. I originally thought hi prisa tashmish to tashmishu. They used to line the aron inside with curtains, and those curtains have the status of tashmish to tashmish. Because the aron itself is not Sefer Torah, the aron is tashmish to kedusha. And therefore, any curtains that you put inside the aron, they have the din, the status of tashmish di tashmish. But says Rava came into chazina di aifile umanchi sifra iluye. So those curtains sometimes are used to wrap the Sefer Torah around. Amina tashmish kedusha hu v'yos. Rava number 3. Hi tevusa de irpat. So we have now a teva, and again, as opposed to a bima, a teva is an ark in which houses a Sefer Torah, more than one Sefer Torah, the irpat, and it fell apart. Mi avda teva zutroi shari. You can take the parts of this ark, the smallest segments, and it's permissible So let's say you have a large ark and it falls apart. You want to now take the pieces of the large ark and make a smaller ark. That's called a teva zutroi, a smaller ark. Shari, you're allowed to do it, but kursaya asur. You want to take the wood of the ark and build yourself a bima, that you're not allowed to do. Because the bima has a lower sanctity than the aron. The Amarav in the 4th psak, high prisa de bava, so you've got now a curtain, and you use the curtain to line the inner compartment of the aron, is lemevad prisa l'sifri shari. Sifri means they used to have scrolls for each one of the 5, separate scrolls for each one of the 5 chumashim. So you want to take the curtains from the inside of the aron and use them for a cover for chumashim. He says the following: if it's prisa l'sifri shari, but l'chumshan asur. If you want to create a mantle for a Sefer Torah from the curtains that adorn the inside of the aron, you're allowed to do so. Because a mantle for the Sefer Torah has at least the same darg of kedusha as the inner lining of the aron. But l'chumshin asur. If it's not a full Sefer Torah, but it's only one single chumash out of the 5 chumashim, then it's asur. So they had a minig of writing a single chumash on a scroll, and a chumash scroll lacks the sanctity of a full Torah scroll, and therefore to take the curtains that are used to cover the inside of the Aron and designate them as a cover for a chumash, that's us. That's already diminishing its status of Kedusha. Number 5. The Omar Rava, Hai, Hani, Zvili, de Chumshe, the Kamatri, the Sifri, is Kula, is Tashmishi, Kedusha Ninu, Benignozim. So it's interesting. A chumash written on parchment, one single chumash of the 5, has less of a sanctity, or certainly not higher sanctity, than the curtains inside the Aron. But yet, a covering over a chumash is tashmishay kedusha. And now he introduces the concept of geniza. You have tashmishay kedusha that are no longer functioning. You have to hide them under the ground. So the Gemara says pshita ma'odetema hani lav lekavod avidan. These cases that we use for individual chumashim is lav lekavod avi. They weren't created for kavod, but rather linturi bi'alma avdi. They have a function to protect the cloth that is surrounded by these neture bi'alma, by these sacks. And therefore, there's a real serious havamina here that these are only linturi bi'alma. They don't have that same kedusha level. Kamash malan, no. That as long as they're being mishamesh kedusha, they have the status of tashmishay kedusha. The Jewish people in Rome had their own base knesses. It opened up into a certain chamber. And that chamber was right now for the balance of the Shabbos. So now there's a problem. You've got a chamber and you have a mess inside the chamber. The Kohanim want to enter in to daven. Asu Amru Leila Rava. They came and they told Rava, Amar Lahu Delu Tevuta Osvua. So Rava tells them to take the Aron and block the entranceway into the room. Right, for here we have to know a little bit about Tumas Kalin. So if you have a kli eitz that is put in a certain place, and that's where it's going to remain, that's called asui lenachas. Ukli eitz asui lenachas eino mekabel tum. V'chotzeitz b'fnei atum. Oh, that's what we needed. V'chotzeitz b'fnei atum. So in other words, in order to allow the Kohanim to enter into the shul to daven, when there's a corpse lying in the idrona, then you have to set up a chatzitza, and that's going to be a kli eitz ha'asui l'nachas. Okay, let's see if we can wrap it up. Amar lahu Rabbanan l'Rav. For zimnin de metaltale ki monach sefer Torah luye. V'havile metaltala mole rekom. You want to tell me that the Aron could serve as a kli ha'osui lenachas, and it's permanent? It's not really permanent, because let's say they need a place to put the Aron, to put the Sefer Torah, they'll put it inside this Aron. So you want to use this Aron as a kli eitz ha'osi lenachas, and it's chotzitz v'atuma. This is not osi lenachas, but rather havale metaltala mole v'rekom, something which you move around even if it's full or if it's empty. So Rava says, if you're correct that they actually move the Aron when they need to place a Sefer Torah inside of it, then then you can't be chotzeitz the entrance into this chamber where the mess is. Omer Marzutra mitpachos sforim shebalu. What do you do with we said that there's a status of tashmiche kedusha to the wrappings that cover the sforim. Now they became disintegrated. Osim also tachrichim lemes mitzvah. We will redesignate it as tachrichim for a mes mitzvah. Again, I don't know how often mes mitzvah would happen, but at least we can have ready the tachrichim. V'zui knizasa. That's the equivalent of hiding them away. Yoma Rava Sefer Torah Shabola. Have a Sefer Torah that won out. We have probably one here. Is going to also Eitzel Talmud Chacham. We're going to take the Sefer Torah and we're going to hide it, meaning bury it, next to a Torah scholar, afilu shona halachos, or even someone who simply knows how to read and explain plain, simple halachos. Omer of Achabar Yaakov, he adds a stipulation here, ubekli cheres. We should put the Torah into kli cheres, because that's going to protect the Torah from being deteriorated. Shenemar, I think this is Yeshaya, no, I'm sorry, Yirmiyah, unesatem bekli cheres l'man yamdu Yomi rak. Right, the Jewish people were going into Golus, and they had certain documents so that Amir Hashem, when they or their descendants would come back, so they'd be able to lay claim to their property. And they had to put these documents in a place that would protect them. And they put it into Kli Cheres. Omar Apapi Mishmei de Rava mi bei knishta le bei Rabbanon shari mi bei Rabbanon bei knishta also. It means that a base hamedrash has a higher level of kedusha than a base haknesses. So you can sell a base knesses, or you can transform it and rededicate it into a base hamedrash. But the opposite, to take a base hamedrash and make it into base knesses, is also. This doesn't make much sense. Anyway, Rav Papa Mishmei de Rava Masli Ibcha, and on the contrary, a Beis HaKnesses has a greater level of sanctity than a Beis HaMedrash. Because Tefillah, in a Beis HaKnesses, Tefillah is absolutely critical. We can't live without it. And not only that, it could be that what the Gemara has in mind in the name of Ravi is that even a Beis HaKnesses could be used when necessary as a Beis HaMedrash. Omar of Acha. And here we're going to finish up on the top of Chav Zayin and Aleph. Kavase derapapi mistabra. It's logical. The Omar, Rav Yeshua ben Levi, Beis HaKnesses mutal asosa Beis HaMedrash. You're allowed to convert a shul into a Beis HaMedrash because a Beis HaMedrash has a higher level of Kedusha Shmamina. So this is a support for the original position of Rav Papi, who allowed you to convert a Beis HaKnesses. Just 1 second, no. Now we're saying, I'm sorry, I just lost the cheshbon here. A Beis HaKnesses to a Beis HaMedrash. Yeah, I got it right. The original formulation is that a Beis HaMedrash has a higher level. It means they don't use a Beis HaKnesses for anything but tefillah. And Torah is on a higher level of Kedusha than tefillah, and therefore Beis HaMedrash is greater in Kedusha than a Beis HaKnesses. Okay, then, so this is where we're going to stop here on the top of Chav Zayin, and in Mitzvah Hashem, we hope to get a chance to record Daf Chav Ches, which is tomorrow's Shabbos' Daf. So I'll wish you a great Shabbos. Thank you so much.